She married well and rode the coattails. The Navy is a small world. These things happen. A woman meets the right people at the right time. I heard every word. I was 3 feet away, my back half turned, a glass of ice water pressed against my palm. The condensation ran cold between my fingers. I didn't turn around. I took a sip, set the glass down, adjusted the silver pin on my left lapel. My name is Laurel Pennington. I'm 39 years old, and up until 12 seconds ago, I was standing quietly at the edge of a Navy League gala in a charcoal silk dress, listening to a string quartet play something I couldn't name. Now I'm listening to my stepmother explain to a circle of senior officers' wives how I slept my way to captain. She doesn't know that yet. She doesn't know what that pin means. She doesn't know who else is listening. They hadn't counted on one thing. If you've ever stood in a room full of people and heard someone rewrite your entire life in a single sentence, hit that like button and subscribe. Let me go back. I learned the hard way that in some families, silence isn't treated as discipline. It's treated as evidence. Evidence of guilt, of failure, of a life too small to bother defending. My silence was never seen as strength, only proof that I didn't matter enough to argue. The night Gretchen told a ballroom full of Navy families that my rank was a favor someone did for me, something inside me shifted like a bone that never set right. But I'm getting ahead of myself. I grew up in Annapolis, Maryland, not because of the Naval Academy, because my father, Hugh Pennington, practiced maritime law from a brick office 6 blocks from the harbor. He specialized in admiralty cases. He knew the language of the sea the way lawyers know it, through contracts, through liability, through the weight of precedent. He never knew it the way I would come to know it, through weather systems and watch rotations and the sound a guided missile destroyer makes when it cuts through the Philippine Sea at 28 knots in the dark. My mother died when I was 14. Ovarian cancer. She was gone in 7 months. My father grieved the way men of his generation grieve, by working longer hours and speaking in shorter sentences until the silence became permanent. I was the intense child, too curious, too quiet, too precise. I filled the house with library books about naval architecture and tide charts and the physics of displacement hulls. My father would find them stacked on the kitchen counter in the morning. He never said a word about them. He never said a word about much. I entered the Naval Academy at 18, commissioned as an ensign at 22. Surface warfare, blue water operations. The thing about surface warfare is that it doesn't photograph well for civilians. There's no single dramatic image, no cockpit, no parachute. It's a ship. It's 300 feet of steel and ordnance and radar and crew. It's 280 people whose sleep schedules and career trajectories and physical safety depend on your judgment at 3 in the morning when the weather turns and the tactical picture shifts. It is not glamorous. It is not loud. It is the quietest kind of authority there is. I rose through the ranks the way surface warfare officers rise, evaluation by evaluation, deployment by deployment, selection board by selection board. Lieutenant, lieutenant commander, commander. Each promotion reviewed by panels of senior officers who had never met me socially and did not care who I knew. That is how the Navy works. Promotion boards review records, not relationships. Fitness reports, operational evaluations, command climate surveys, performance metrics scored to the decimal. Fewer than 10% of naval officers ever reach 06. I made captain at 37. My cover story, if you could call it that, was never elaborate. When civilians asked what I did, I said the same thing I had always said. I drive ships. When they pressed, I gave them one more sentence. Fleet operations, mostly logistics from the outside. Then I changed the subject. Not because anything was classified in the dramatic sense, because the gap between what I did and what a dinner party could absorb was wider than any explanation could bridge. Some clients prefer discretion. The Navy doesn't need clients, it needs competence. And competence, in my experience, has never required a speech. Gretchen Elise Morley entered my father's life when I was 35. I was already a commander. I was already stationed in San Diego, preparing for department head screening. I flew home for the wedding. Small ceremony. A restaurant with white tablecloths and a view of the Chesapeake. Gretchen wore a cream suit and introduced herself to every guest by listing the last 3 galas she had organized for the Annapolis Arts Council. She touched my father's arm when she spoke. She touched everyone's arm when she spoke. She asked me one question that entire weekend. So you're the Navy daughter. What is it you actually do on those ships? I told her the truth. I drive them. She laughed, not unkindly. The way people laugh when they've already decided the answer doesn't matter. That was the last honest question she ever asked me. Denial, I would learn, was her specialty. Over the next 4 years, Gretchen built a story. Not all at once. Stories like hers are constructed the way termites work. From the inside out, invisibly, until the structure is hollow and everyone is standing on what they assume is solid ground. She told it at dinner parties. She told it over wine with the neighbors. She told it, eventually, to my father, so many times that he stopped hearing it as opinion and started hearing it as fact. The story was simple. Laurel married well. Laurel met the right people. Laurel rode the coattails. The divorce from Dennis, a good man, an architect. A marriage that ended quietly and without cruelty after 2 years, became proof that I couldn't hold a life together on shore. My absences, Yokosuka, San Diego, 7 months in the Western Pacific, became proof that I was running from something rather than running toward anything. My silence about my work became proof that I had nothing to be proud of. She painted a picture of a woman living in delusion. They hadn't just forgotten me. They'd rewritten me. The uniform, Gretchen told anyone who would listen, was just a costume if no one was watching you actually do anything. She said it warmly, conspiratorially, as though she was sharing something sad about a woman she genuinely worried about. My father heard it. He filled in what he didn't know with what Gretchen told him. He had never attended a Navy function. He had never seen me in command. He had never stood on the bridge of the USS Baton and watched 280 sailors execute a combat readiness drill at 97.4%, the fleet's highest score that year. He operated on the assumption that Gretchen's social intelligence was reliable. He was not malicious. He was absent in the way that causes the same damage. Growing up in the Pennington household meant earning affection like rent, and the lease was never in your name. Now, the Gala. Spring, 2024. A Navy League event at a naval station ballroom in the D.C. area. Brass fixtures. Oil portraits of fleet admirals lining the entry corridor. The air inside smelled of wood smoke from candles in brass holders and something faintly metallic, the way large rooms with old radiators always smell when they're heated for crowds. I came because Commander Patricia Wells, my former executive officer aboard the Baton, called and said the mentorship pipeline needed a public champion. I did not come for the dinner. I did not come for my father. I arrived alone, in a rideshare, at exactly the stated start time. No early arrival, no late entrance. Charcoal silk dress, sleeves to the elbow, the silver surface warfare officer pin on my left lapel, small enough that most people dismissed it without a second glance. I moved through the receiving line the way I move through receiving lines, efficiently, without waste. My name badge was printed incorrectly. L. Pennington, guest. Not captain. Not USN, guest. No one was waiting at the door. No family table reserved with my name. No chair. That was it. No welcome. No warmth. Just a misprinted badge and the clink of ice against crystal. The room organized itself by social orbit, the way these rooms always do. The wives of flag officers occupied the inner ring near the head table. Gretchen had placed herself there. She arrived with Hugh 40 minutes early. I knew this because Meg Calloway Ross mentioned it in passing, warmly, without realizing what it told me. Gretchen had ordered an extra chair at the flag wives' table. For Hugh. Not for me. There was no chair for me at that table. Family photos lined the mantel at home. None of them featured me. Here, the equivalent was a framed Navy League program listing tonight's honorees, propped on a brass easel near the centerpiece. White orchids, shrimp cocktail arranged like a crown, fillets already plated. My Meritorious Service Medal was cited in that program. Gretchen held it, read it, set it down, said nothing. The circle formed naturally. 3 senior officers' wives, Meg Calloway Ross among them. Gretchen at the center, the way she always placed herself. Within 4 minutes of arrival, without visible effort, she spoke with the cadence of someone sharing a confidence. Warm, measured, the kind of voice that makes cruelty sound like concern. She married well and rode the coattails. The Navy is a small world. These things happen. A woman meets the right people at the right time. She gestured toward my back as she spoke. A small motion, palm open, the way you gesture toward something you pity. Meg Calloway Ross saw the gesture. She did not return it. Her expression didn't change, but her hand, the one holding her champagne flute, went very still. Then Gretchen added the rest. The divorce. She couldn't maintain a marriage. What does that tell you? The absences. She's never around. You can't build a real career by being absent. The silence. If you had nothing to hide, you'd be proud to talk about it. And then, the line she had been sharpening for 4 years, the one she saved for rooms exactly like this one. The uniform is just a costume if no one's watching you actually do anything. I folded my napkin beside my untouched plate. Even the candle flame nearest Gretchen seemed to hesitate. The string quartet finished its piece. For 2 full seconds, the room held nothing but the faint hiss of radiators and the settling of brass. Hugh stood 12 feet away. He heard it. All of it. His hand was in his pocket. His jaw was set in the way it had been set since 1999. Locked, distant, waiting for someone else to say the thing he couldn't. He said nothing. Not yet. What Gretchen didn't know, what none of them knew, was that Vice Admiral Terrence Allen Holt, 3 stars, commander of Naval Surface Forces Pacific, was standing 9 feet behind her left shoulder. He had arrived with his aide, a young lieutenant junior grade, and had been working the perimeter of the flag table the way senior officers work rooms, efficiently, without waste. His gaze had already found my pin. He wasn't looking at Gretchen. He was looking at me. And his expression had just changed in the specific way of a man who has recognized something important, in a place he did not expect to find it. Across the room, Commander Wells saw him looking. She went very still. That was the last moment Gretchen Morley Pennington controlled the room. The Silver Surface Warfare Officer pin is not a decoration. It is not jewelry. It is not something you purchase at a gift shop or inherit from a relative who once served. It is earned through qualification aboard a surface combatant. Written examinations, practical assessments, watch station proficiency boards, and a final qualification interview conducted by the commanding officer of your ship. Every surface warfare officer in the United States Navy knows what that pin looks like. Every surface warfare officer in the United States Navy knows what it costs. Gretchen had seen it on my lapel earlier that evening. She had glanced at it the way she glanced at everything I wore. Quickly, dismissively, with the specific disinterest of a woman who had already decided that nothing on my person could surprise her. To Gretchen, it was a small silver brooch, a modest accessory on a modest dress, something a woman wears when she doesn't have better jewelry. She had no idea she was looking at 18 years of sea duty compressed into an inch and a half of metal. Vice Admiral Holt knew. He knew because he had pinned the gold version's equivalent, the Captain's Eagles, 2 silver 06 Eagles, onto my collar at Yokosuka Naval Base in 2022. He knew because he had reviewed the fitness reports that put me in the command pipeline. He knew because when he presided over that ceremony, my crew turned out in full dress uniform without being ordered to. 280 sailors. Nobody asked them to come. They simply showed up. He told me afterward it was the first time in 11 years of presiding over promotion ceremonies that he had seen an entire ship's company appear voluntarily. He remembered. He was remembering now. His gaze moved from the pin to my face, then back to the pin, then to the circle of women behind me, where Gretchen's voice was still carrying, warm, conspiratorial, sharpened to a point that only I could feel. He did not move toward the circle. Not immediately. He tilted his head a single degree toward his aide. The lieutenant junior grade leaned in. Holt said something I could not hear. The aide nodded once, moved 3 steps to the left, and positioned himself with a clear sight line to the east wall. I turned away before Holt could approach, not because I felt threatened, not because I wanted to avoid him, because I knew exactly how fragile that moment was, and how permanent what came next would be. The thing about silence is that it isn't always passive. Sometimes silence is the sharpest answer. Gretchen was still talking. She had found her rhythm now, the rhythm of a woman who mistakes the absence of contradiction for agreement. She leaned forward in her chair. She lowered her voice to the register she reserved for her most damaging observations, the register that made cruelty sound like medical concern. She's always somewhere else, Japan, San Diego, somewhere. Never here, never accountable. She paused. Let the silence do its work. People don't advance like that unless someone is helping them. I'm not saying anything unkind. I'm saying what everyone already suspects. Meg Calloway Ross set her champagne flute on the table. She did not pick it up again. The second wife in the circle, a woman named Diane Anderson, married to a retired captain, shifted her weight backward. Not dramatically. An inch. Maybe 2. The kind of retreat that happens when the body registers something the mind hasn't named yet. The third wife said nothing. She was looking past Gretchen's shoulder. She was looking at the 3 stars on Vice Admiral Holt's shoulder boards. Holt moved. Not quickly. He never moved quickly anywhere. He didn't need to. He crossed the 8 feet between the flag table perimeter and Gretchen's circle in 4 measured steps. His aide remained stationary. His 4 rows of ribbons caught the chandelier light in a way that made the decorations look less like fabric and more like a ledger. Every campaign, every commendation, every year of service itemized and pressed flat against his chest. He stopped directly beside Gretchen's chair, close enough that she had to look up, close enough that the 3 stars were at her eye level. Gretchen turned. She saw the uniform first, then the stars, then the face of a man she had never met but whose rank she understood instinctively, not as a military designation, but as social currency. Her expression rearranged itself in a quarter second. The conspiratorial warmth vanished. In its place, the specific brightness she deployed for people she perceived as important. "Admiral," she said. She extended her hand. "Gretchen Morley Pennington. I'm Hugh's wife, Laurel's stepmother." She smiled. "I was just saying how proud we are of her." The room tilted just slightly. Holt looked at her hand. He did not take it. He looked at me. "Captain Pennington." 2 words. My rank. My name. Spoken at a volume calibrated to carry exactly as far as the circle and no farther. Spoken with the precision of a man who has addressed thousands of officers and has never once used the wrong title. If you've ever been underestimated by people who don't know the real story, hit that like button and subscribe. Gretchen's hand was still extended. It stayed there for 1 second. 2. Then it lowered to her lap. Her smile held, but the muscles beneath it were working harder now. "You know, Laurel," she said. Not a question. A recalibration. "I know Captain Pennington." He emphasized the rank the way a jeweler sets a stone, precisely, immovably. "I pinned her captain's eagles myself. Yokosuka Naval Base, 2022. I presided over her 06 promotion ceremony." Silence. The specific silence of 5 women processing information that contradicts everything they have been told in the last 4 minutes. Her crew turned out in full dress uniform for that ceremony, Holt continued. His voice did not rise. It did not need to. 280 sailors. Nobody ordered them to attend. They came voluntarily. In 11 years of presiding over promotion ceremonies, I had not seen that before. Gretchen's smile was still holding, but her posture had changed. Her shoulders had drawn inward a 1/4 inch. Her fingers were pressed flat against her thigh. "I reviewed Captain Pennington's fitness reports personally at 2 critical career junctions," Holt said. Her selection for major command was based on operational evaluations scored to the decimal by panels of senior officers who had never met her socially. He paused. Let the architecture of that sentence do its work. Promotion boards in the United States Navy review records, not relationships. Diane Anderson's hand moved to the base of her throat. She held it there. Meg Calloway Ross looked at me. Her gaze was steady. It held no pity. It held recognition. Commander Wells, 12 feet away, had stopped breathing. I could see it in the stillness of her shoulders. The absolute absence of motion that happens when someone who served beside you watches the record get corrected in real time. Holt turned back to Gretchen. He looked at her the way he looked at operational briefings that contained errors, with patience, and with the understanding that the error would be corrected regardless of whether the person who made it was comfortable. Captain Pennington commanded USS Baton through a 7-month Western Pacific deployment, he said. Her ship posted the fleet's highest combat readiness score, 97.4%. He let the number sit. She was awarded the Meritorious Service Medal. That is a personal decoration, Mrs. Morley Pennington. Not a unit award. It is hers. She earned it. through performance reviewed at every level of the surface warfare chain of command. Gretchen opened her mouth, then closed it. Her hand moved from her thigh to the edge of the table. She gripped it, her knuckles whitened by a shade. I didn't mean to suggest. Holt did not wait for her to finish. "Whiskey 7, he said quietly. He was looking at me now, only at me. "That was your fleet call designation during the Westpac deployment. I remember because your readiness reports crossed my desk every 30 days. Every single one exceeded baseline by margins I had to verify twice. The verification. The question only the real chain of command would know. The verbal totem that no civilian could fabricate, no dinner party narrative could counterfeit, no 4 years of warm conspiratorial whispers could touch. I met his gaze. I did not smile. I did not nod. I held steady. "Yes, sir." 2 words. The only 2 that mattered. Holt turned to the circle one final time. He did not raise his voice. He did not need to. "Captain Pennington is one of the finest surface warfare officers I have had the privilege of reviewing in my career. Her record speaks at a volume that makes additional commentary unnecessary." He paused, looked at Gretchen. "From anyone." Gretchen's grip on the table edge tightened. The color had drained from her face in stages. First the cheeks, then the jaw, then the hollow at her throat. She looked like a woman watching the floor she had built dissolve beneath her without a sound. Her mouth opened once more. No words came. Her champagne glass sat untouched beside her hand, a single bead of condensation tracing a line down the crystal. She looked at Hugh. Hugh was 12 feet away. His hand was still in his pocket. His jaw was still locked. But his eyes, for the first time in years, were not looking at Gretchen. They were looking at me. Holt extended his hand, not to Gretchen, not to Hugh, not to any of the women in the circle who had listened in silence while my career was dismantled over shrimp cocktail. To me. "Captain Pennington, it's an honor to see you tonight. Ma'am." I took his hand, firm, brief. The handshake of 2 officers who understood that the gesture was not social. It was institutional. It carried the weight of every evaluation, every watch rotation, every pre-dawn decision made in open water, with 280 lives calibrated against my judgment. "Thank you, Admiral. The honor is mine." 7 words. I did not add to them. I did not need to. Holt released my hand, gave a single nod, the kind that closes a conversation and opens a permanent record, and turned back toward the flag table. His aide fell into step behind him. 4 rows of ribbons. 3 stars. The measured gait of a man who had just corrected an error and saw no reason to remain at the site of the correction. The circle dissolved. It didn't scatter. It dissolved. The way formations break when the commanding authority has spoken, and there is nothing left to organize around. Diane Anderson excused herself to the restroom. The 3rd wife, whose name I never caught, moved toward the bar without looking back. Meg Calloway Ross remained. She looked at me for 3 full seconds, then she lifted her champagne flute from the table, took a single sip, and said one sentence. "Welcome home, Captain." It wasn't obedience. It wasn't ceremony. It was recognition from a woman who had spent 30 years married to a surface warfare officer and knew exactly what she had just witnessed. Gretchen sat alone at the flag wives' table. The extra chair, Hugh's chair, was empty. Hugh had moved 6 feet closer to me and then stopped, caught in the no man's land between the woman he had married and the daughter he had failed to defend. His hand was out of his pocket now. It hung at his side. Open. uncertain. The posture of a man who has just realized that the narrative he accepted for 4 years was written by someone who had never read the source material. He opened his mouth. I watched the muscles in his jaw work. "Laurel, not tonight, Dad." 3 words. I kept my voice level. My hands stayed at my sides. I did not owe him an explanation. I did not owe him a performance of grief or a catalogue of the years he let Gretchen rewrite me over dinner while I was standing watch in the Philippine Sea. I did not owe him the comfort of my anger. Anger would have given him something to respond to. Silence gave him only the shape of what he had missed. He nodded, slowly, the nod of a man absorbing a verdict. I turned toward the east wall, where Commander Wells was standing with her hands clasped behind her back. Parade rest, the posture she defaulted to whenever her emotions outpaced her ability to control them. Her eyes were red, not from crying, from the effort of not crying. "XO," I said. "Captain." Her voice cracked on the second syllable. She straightened. "That mentorship pipeline proposal. I have the revised numbers." "Good. Send them Monday." That was all. That was enough. 2 officers conducting business in the middle of a ballroom while the wreckage of someone else's narrative settled like dust around them. 22 minutes later, Gretchen retrieved her wrap from the coat check during dessert staging. She left before plates were set. Hugh followed her. He paused at the ballroom door for 4 seconds, I counted, and looked back over his shoulder. I was talking to Meg Calloway Ross about fleet readiness benchmarks. I did not look up. That was it. Gretchen did not make a scene. She did not confront me. She did not demand a correction or attempt to reframe what Holt had said. She simply left. The way people leave when the floor they built has been identified, publicly and without malice, as hollow. The damage did not announce itself. It accumulated. Within 2 weeks, 3 of the officers' wives who had been in that circle contacted the Navy League chapter to verify what Holt had said. They found the program listing, the one Gretchen had held and set down without comment, citing my meritorious service medal. They found the Navy's public affairs release on USS Baton's readiness score. They found the official Navy biography listing my command tour, my deployments, my qualification record. Everything Holt had stated was verifiable. Everything Gretchen had constructed was not. The phone calls to Gretchen from the social circuit slowed, then stopped. Not dramatically. The way invitations stop when trust dissolves. A gala committee that forgets to send the email. A luncheon table that fills before your RSVP arrives. A charity board that restructures its membership criteria in ways that happen to exclude you. Gretchen's currency had always been adjacency to prestige. When the women closest to actual prestige stopped returning her calls, the currency collapsed. She had crafted this story carefully. She had distributed it for 4 years, and it took Vice Admiral Holt 11 sentences to dismantle it. My father called me 3 weeks after the gala. I was at my desk at Naval Station San Diego, reviewing readiness reports for the next deployment cycle. His voice sounded older than 67. It sounded like a man who had been doing math he should have done years ago and didn't like the sum. "I didn't know, Laurel. I didn't know any of it." I set my pen down. "You didn't ask." Silence on the line. The silence of a man hearing the simplest sentence in the English language and understanding, for the first time, that it was the only indictment that mattered. "You didn't want the truth, Dad. You wanted a version that was easier to live with. Gretchen gave you one. You took it. Every time." He didn't argue. He didn't defend. That was new. I should have been there, he said. At your ceremonies, your deployments, your... You should have asked one question, I said. In 4 years. 1. You could have called any Navy liaison. You could have looked at a public directory. You could have walked into any Navy League chapter and asked what your daughter's rank meant. You didn't. Not because you couldn't. Because believing Gretchen was easier than believing me. The line held nothing but the faint hum of a long-distance connection. I'm proud of you, he said finally, quietly, the way men of his generation say things they should have said a decade ago. I know, I said, but pride without presence is just a word. I did not forgive him. I did not refuse to forgive him. I simply let the conversation end where it ended, in the space between what he owed and what I no longer needed. Hugh and Gretchen separated 4 months after the gala. I learned this from Meg Calloway Ross, not from my father. Gretchen retained the hyphenated name. She retained the Annapolis house. She did not retain the social infrastructure she had spent 4 years building on a foundation of fabricated authority. Meg told me the separation was quiet. I expected nothing else. Gretchen had always been skilled at retreating from rooms she could no longer control. My father sent me a letter in August, handwritten, 3 pages. I read it once. I put it in the bottom drawer of my desk beside my deployment orders and the photograph of my mother that I have carried through every duty station since 2007. I did not respond to the letter. Not out of spite. Not out of pride. But because some things require more than words, and I had spent 18 years learning the difference between language and action. 6 months after the gala, the mentorship pipeline went live. 50 female surface warfare officers, funded through the Naval Academy Alumni Association. Commander Wells ran the administrative side. I ran the operational advising. We didn't hold a press conference. We didn't issue a statement. We built the program the way you build anything that matters. Quietly, structurally, with the understanding that the women moving through that pipeline would never need to explain their qualifications to anyone at a dinner party, because their records would speak at a volume that made additional commentary unnecessary. I still drive ships. That hasn't changed. My office at Naval Station San Diego overlooks the harbor. On clear mornings, I can see the silhouette of a guided missile destroyer at the far pier. Not the Baton, she's forward deployed now, but the shape is the same. The shape is always the same. 300 feet of steel and purpose cutting the waterline like an argument that doesn't need to be made. No one at the base calls me by my last name. No one calls me the Navy daughter. No one calls me guest. Just Laurel. I wear the gold surface warfare officer pin on my uniform. I wear the silver one on my civilian clothes. Neither one needs an explanation. Neither one has ever needed an explanation. The thing about silence is that most people mistake it for absence. They hear nothing and assume nothing is there. They see stillness and assume surrender. They watch a woman stand quietly at the edge of a room with a glass of water and an unmarked pin, and they think they know the full story. They never do. Silence isn't the absence of noise. It is the weight of what people think they know about you, pressed down so hard it squeezes the breath out of your own truth. And when that weight finally lifts, not because you threw it off, but because someone with the authority to speak simply spoke, what's left is not revenge. It is not vindication. It is clarity. There is power in patience. There is freedom in truth, even when it comes late. And there is a particular kind of peace that belongs only to those who never needed the room to know their name in order to know it themselves. I am no longer missing from the narrative. I was never missing. I was deployed. If you enjoyed this story about quiet competence winning over loud arrogance, hit that like button and let me know what you think in the comments. And if you haven't subscribed yet, make sure to subscribe and ring that notification bell for more stories just like this one. Thanks for watching.